Most haunted places come with a story, a death, a disaster, a secret that never quite got buried deep enough. Some of these places have been investigated, debunked, and investigated again, and the stories still won't go away. These are America's 15 most haunted places locals warn not to visit. Number 15, the Winchester Mystery House, San Jose, California. Sarah Winchester was one of the wealthiest women in America in the late 1800s. She was also, by most accounts, genuinely afraid of the dead. After the deaths of her infant daughter in 1866 and her husband William Wirt Winchester, heir to the Winchester rifle fortune, in 1881, Sarah reportedly consulted a medium who told her she was being haunted by the spirits of everyone killed by a Winchester rifle. The remedy, the medium allegedly suggested, was to build a house continuously. If construction ever stopped, she would die. Sarah moved to San Jose, California in 1884 and began building. She didn't stop for 38 years, until her death in September 1922. The result is one of the strangest buildings in the United States. The Winchester Mystery House has 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 47 fireplaces, and stairways that lead directly into ceilings. There are doors that open onto sheer drops to the garden below, chimneys that stop just short of the roof, a seance room at the center of the house where Sarah reportedly communicated with spirits every night to receive the next day's building instructions. Whether any of that is true is impossible to verify. What is verifiable is the house itself, a sprawling, labyrinthine Victorian structure that makes no architectural sense and was clearly built by someone working from a logic that wasn't entirely conventional. Visitors and staff have reported footsteps in empty hallways, cold spots in sealed rooms, and the persistent sensation of being watched. The house has been open to the public since 1923, one day after Sarah's funeral. Number 14, the St. Augustine Lighthouse, St. Augustine, Florida. St. Augustine is already one of the oldest European settled cities in the United States, founded in 1565. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that its lighthouse comes with a few layers of history. The current lighthouse was completed in 1874, but a lighthouse has stood near this location since the Spanish colonial period. During construction of the present structure, 3 children, the daughters and a friend of the lighthouse's construction supervisor, Hezekiah Pitti, drowned when a supply cart rolled into the water while they were playing on it. The oldest was around 11 years old. Visitors and staff have since reported seeing the apparition of a young girl on the lighthouse grounds and on the spiral staircase inside. Cold spots, unexplained shadows, and the sound of children laughing in empty areas have been documented repeatedly over the decades. The lighthouse was featured on the TV series Ghost Hunters in 2005, and crew members reported equipment failures and audible voices on recordings made inside the tower. The Lighthouse and Maritime Museum, which now operates the site, takes the history seriously, including the parts that are harder to explain. Lighthouse keeper Joseph Andreu also died at the site in 1859, falling from scaffolding while painting the old tower. His wife, reportedly, watched it happen from the ground below. The lighthouse is open to the public. The children are not. Number 13. Myrtles Plantation, St. Francisville, Louisiana. The Myrtles Plantation was built around 1796 in the rolling hills of West Feliciana Parish, Louisiana. It operated as a working plantation before the Civil War and changed hands multiple times afterward. Across those decades, multiple violent deaths occurred on the property, including at least one confirmed murder. William Drew Winter, a lawyer who owned the plantation in the 1870s, was shot on the front porch by an unknown assailant in 1871. According to accounts passed down through the generations, he staggered inside and died on the 17th step of the main staircase. Guests staying at what is now a bed and breakfast have reported hearing footsteps that stop precisely at that step. A figure in period clothing has been described by multiple independent visitors on the main staircase. The large antique mirror in the front hallway, original to the house, is perhaps the most discussed feature. Handprints are said to appear on its surface and cannot be fully removed. Some accounts describe the outlines of adult and child hands. The most frequently told story involves a slave named Chloe, described in local legend as having been caught eavesdropping by owner Clark Woodruff, who had her ear cut off as punishment. She allegedly baked a birthday cake laced with oleander to make the family ill, miscalculated the dose, and poisoned and killed Woodruff's wife and 2 daughters. Other enslaved people on the property reportedly hanged her and threw her body in the river. Historians have found no documented evidence to verify the Chloe story specifically. What is documented is that several members of the Woodruff family did die of what was recorded as yellow fever in 1823. The legend has become inseparable from the property regardless. The Myrtles has been called one of America's most haunted homes since at least the 1970s. It continues to operate as a historic inn. Number 12. Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Eastern State Penitentiary opened in 1829 and was, at the time, considered a revolutionary experiment in criminal justice. The idea was solitary confinement, total isolation, enforced silence, and mandatory labor with the goal of inducing genuine penitence. Inmates were hooded when moved through the facility so they couldn't see or be seen. The conditions were brutal. Inmates spent 23 hours a day alone in their cells. The psychological toll was documented even by the prison's own administrators. Charles Dickens visited in 1842 and wrote that the practice of total isolation inflicted a kind of torture that left deep mental wounds, immeasurably worse than any torture of the body. The prison held some of America's most famous criminals over its 142-year operating history, including Al Capone, who was incarcerated there briefly in 1929 on a weapons charge. His cell was furnished with considerable comfort, rugs, a desk, paintings, compared to the standard issue. Eastern State closed in 1971 and sat abandoned for 2 decades before being opened as a historic site. The deterioration of the building during those years, peeling paint, collapsed cell blocks, vegetation growing through cracked floors, created an environment that has consistently ranked among the most atmospheric in the country. Staff and visitors have reported shadow figures moving through cell blocks, faces peering from doorways, and hands reaching from cells. Cell Block 12 in particular has a persistent reputation, with multiple independent accounts describing a dark figure that appears and disappears along the corridor. The prison runs a well-known Halloween attraction called Terror Behind the Walls, but the staff who work there year-round will tell you the unsettling parts aren't seasonal. Number 11. The Whaley House, Old Town, San Diego, California. The Whaley House in Old Town, San Diego is one of the few locations in the United States that the U.S. Commerce Department has officially designated as haunted, a distinction that is, to be fair, extremely rare and extremely unofficial, but which gets repeated so often it has taken on a life of its own. The house was built in 1857 by Thomas Whaley on a site that had previously been used as the town's public gallows. The most frequently hanged man associated with the location was a criminal known as Yankee Jim Robinson, executed there in 1852, 5 years before the house was built. Multiple early residents reportedly described hearing heavy footsteps throughout the house that matched no living occupant. Thomas Whaley himself died in the house. So did his wife Anna and several of their children, including a baby son who died in the house at just 18 months old, and a daughter, Violet, who died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the back courtyard in 1885. The house has been a museum since the 1960s and attracts significant visitors, many of them specifically for the paranormal history. Reported phenomena include the smell of cigar smoke in rooms where no one is smoking, a woman's perfume in the upstairs hallway, the sound of a child crying, and multiple witness accounts of apparitions in period dress. Reggie Sherrill, a longtime docent at the Whaley House, has said, I've worked here for years. Things happen in this house that I can't account for. You get used to it, but you never stop noticing. Number 10. The Stanley Hotel, Estes Park, Colorado. The Stanley Hotel was built by F.O. Stanley, co-inventor of the Stanley Steamer automobile, and opened in 1909 in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. It's a grand white facade resort with a view of the Rockies that is genuinely hard to fault. It's also the hotel that inspired Stephen King to write The Shining. King and his wife Tabitha stayed in room 217 in 1974, near the end of the tourist season, when the hotel was nearly empty. The experience of walking near deserted corridors and hearing unexplained sounds in an isolated mountain hotel was enough. The novel was published in 1977, and the Stanley's place in American horror culture was permanently established. Room 217, where King stayed, is the most requested room in the hotel. Guests report luggage being unpacked by unseen hands, lights turning on and off, and the sensation of a presence in the room. The room has been connected to housekeeper Elizabeth Wilson, who was injured in an accidental gas explosion there in 1911 and is said to still make her rounds. The ballroom has its own reputation. Guests have reported hearing big band music playing in the empty room late at night. Staff have documented pianos in the ballroom playing without anyone seated at them. The fourth floor and the children's portion of the hotel, including the hallways, are among the most consistently reported areas. The Stanley has fully embraced its reputation and offers ghost tours, paranormal investigations, and a museum dedicated to its history and hauntings. Number 9. Gettysburg Battlefield, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Over 3 days in July 1863, approximately 51,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or went missing at Gettysburg, the bloodiest battle of the American Civil War. The sheer scale of death in a confined geographic area has made Gettysburg a focal point for paranormal accounts for over 160 years. The reports are not fringe. Military historians, park rangers, and thousands of ordinary visitors have described seeing figures in period military uniforms in fields where no reenactment was taking place, hearing cannon fire and musket shots on still evenings, and smelling gunpowder in open air with no source. Photographs taken at the battlefield have produced anomalies that photographers and investigators have struggled to explain consistently. Devil's Den, a rocky outcropping on the southern end of the battlefield used by Confederate sharpshooters, has one of the strongest reputations. Visitors have reported a barefoot man in a floppy hat appearing near the rocks and offering to show them where they should point their camera. When they turn around, he's gone. The description matches the dress of Confederate soldiers from that period. The triangular field, adjacent to Devil's Den, is another consistently reported area where cameras, phones, and recording equipment frequently malfunction or die entirely, then resume functioning normally once visitors leave. The same equipment works fine everywhere else on the drive in and out. The Iverson's Pits area, where Confederate General Alfred Iverson's brigade was decimated in a matter of minutes on July 1st, is another site where farmers working the land in the decades after the battle reported seeing soldiers rise from the ground at dusk. Local farmers refused to work that specific section of field for years. Author and historian Mark Nesbitt, who has spent decades documenting Gettysburg's paranormal accounts, has said, "There are too many consistent, independent reports from credible people over too long a period of time to dismiss all of it." Number 8. The Queen Mary, Long Beach, California. The RMS Queen Mary is a retired British ocean liner permanently docked in Long Beach, California, where she has operated as a hotel and tourist attraction since 1967. She is also, by a number of measures, one of the most consistently reported haunted locations in the country. The ship carried troops during World War II and was involved in one of the war's more grim maritime incidents. In October 1942, the Queen Mary was traveling at high speed off the coast of Scotland when she collided with her escort vessel, the HMS Curacoa, cutting the smaller ship in half. The Curacoa sank within minutes. Due to wartime orders prohibiting the Queen Mary from stopping, she was a prime submarine target. She did not turn back. Of the Curacoa's 439 crew members, 338 died. The most frequently reported haunting on the ship centers on the engine room area, where a young sailor named John Petter was reportedly crushed to death in 1966 when watertight door 13, a heavy sliding bulkhead, closed on him during a drill. The door is still on the ship. Staff and visitors in the engine room area have reported a young man in overalls near the door who disappears when approached. The first-class swimming pool, which has been drained and closed to swimming since the 1960s, is another heavily reported location. Wet footprints appear on the surrounding tile with no explanation. The sound of splashing has been reported in the empty pool. The ship has had multiple paranormal investigations conducted aboard, and the hotel staff, many of whom have worked there for years, speak about the experiences matter-of-factly, the way you would about any unremarkable feature of the workplace. Number 7. Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, Weston, West Virginia. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was built between 1858 and 1881 in Weston, West Virginia, and was designed to house 250 patients. At its peak in the mid-20th century, it held over 2,400. The building itself is enormous, the second largest hand-cut stone building in the United States, after the Pentagon. And the history inside matches the scale of the structure. Conditions at overcrowded psychiatric institutions of that era were, by any modern standard, horrific. Patients were subjected to lobotomies, ice baths, and restraints as standard treatment. Violence between patients was common. A measurable number of patients died within the walls, either from illness, mistreatment, or violence. Death records for the institution run into the hundreds. The asylum closed in 1994 after a federal court ordered the state to improve conditions or shut the facility. It was purchased by a private buyer in 2007 and opened for tours, including overnight paranormal investigations. The most consistently reported area is Ward R, the ward that held the most severely mentally ill patients. Visitors on overnight investigations have described voices, physical contact, and apparitions in that section of the building. A young girl reportedly named Lily is one of the more frequently encountered presences, described by multiple unconnected visitors over the years as a small child in the lower corridors. The building is undeniably imposing on its own merits. The paint peels in great sheets from the ceilings. The metal beds are still in the wards. The operating theater is intact. Even without the paranormal layer, it is a deeply uncomfortable place to spend time. Number 6. The Lizzie Borden House, Fall River, Massachusetts. On the morning of August 4, 1892, Andrew Borden and his wife Abby were found murdered in their Fall River, Massachusetts home. Andrew had been struck 11 times with a sharp instrument while sleeping on the sitting room sofa. Abby had been struck 19 times upstairs. Their daughter Lizzie was in the house. The maid, Bridget Sullivan, was also present. Lizzie Borden was arrested, tried, and acquitted. No one else was ever charged. The murders remain officially unsolved. The house at 92 2nd Street has operated as a bed and breakfast since 1996. Guests sleep in the same rooms where the murders took place, including the room where Abby Borden was found. The house has been preserved with period-appropriate furnishings, some of which are original to the Borden family. The reported phenomena at the house are numerous and well documented for a private establishment. Guests have reported a woman in Victorian dress moving through the upstairs hallway. Objects have been found moved between when guests left a room and when they returned. Crying has been heard from empty rooms. One of the more consistent accounts involves the guest room where Abby was killed. Multiple unrelated visitors have reported waking to the sensation of someone sitting on the edge of the bed. Whether the Borden spirits are still in residence or not, the house carries the weight of what happened there in a way that is difficult to attribute entirely to imagination. Number 5. The Ohio State Reformatory, Mansfield, Ohio. The Ohio State Reformatory was built in 1886 in Mansfield, Ohio, and operated as a prison until 1990. The building is a massive Gothic and Romanesque structure, turrets, arched windows, soaring stone walls, designed partly to impress upon inmates the authority of the state and the weight of their situation. It succeeded architecturally, at least. Over its 104 years of operation, the reformatory saw significant violence, including riots, murders, and suicides. The superintendent's wife, Helen Glatke, died in the residential wing of the building in 1950 after a handgun she kept on the closet shelf fell and discharged, shooting her in the chest. Her husband, Arthur Glatke, died of a heart attack in his office several years later. Both deaths occurred inside the building. The reformatory also appeared in the 1994 film The Shawshank Redemption, which used its exterior and several interior locations for filming. The building is now managed by a non-profit and open for public tours and paranormal investigations. Staff have reported apparitions in the administration wing and in the area where Helen Glatke died. The cell block areas, particularly the upper tiers, are reported to produce the most frequent and consistent unexplained sounds: footsteps, the sliding of metal, and voices in empty corridors. One of the prison's guards was also beaten to death by inmates in 1932. His name was Urban Wilford. His presence is reportedly among those felt in the East Cell Block. Number 4. The LaLaurie Mansion, New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans has no shortage of haunted locations. It's practically a municipal industry at this point. But the LaLaurie Mansion on Royal Street in the French Quarter has a documented history that makes most ghost stories feel lightweight. Delphine LaLaurie was a prominent New Orleans socialite in the 1830s, known for her elaborate dinner parties and her social standing. In April 1834, a fire broke out in the mansion's kitchen. When firefighters entered the building, they discovered the kitchen had been deliberately set alight by the cook, an enslaved woman who was reportedly chained to the stove and had set the fire herself, rather than face being taken to an upper room in the house. Firefighters broke into a locked chamber and found several enslaved people in conditions that were described by contemporary newspaper accounts as among the most horrifying ever encountered. People were found chained, mutilated, and in states of extreme suffering. The reports in the New Orleans newspapers of the time were graphic. An enraged mob sacked the mansion. Delphine LaLaurie fled to Paris and never returned to New Orleans. The mansion changed hands many times after 1834, and nearly every owner reported disturbing experiences. Actor Nicolas Cage purchased it in 2007 and sold it in 2009 after reportedly losing it to foreclosure. During his ownership, neighbors described unusual activity around the property, though Cage himself didn't comment publicly on its reputation. What visitors and passers-by report most consistently are sounds from the upper floors, screaming, crying, and the sensation of profound unease when standing outside the building. Given what happened inside it, that reaction seems less paranormal than entirely proportional. Number 3. Alcatraz, San Francisco, California. Alcatraz Island sits in San Francisco Bay, 2.4 kilometers off the city's northern waterfront. It operated as a federal penitentiary from 1934 to 1963, housing some of America's most dangerous and high-profile prisoners: Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the so-called Birdman of Alcatraz, among others. The prison was designed to be inescapable. The cold, fast-moving waters of the bay made swimming to shore extraordinarily dangerous. In 29 years of operation, 36 men attempted to escape. 2 drowned, 5 went missing and are presumed drowned, and 23 were caught and returned. 3 men, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, escaped in June 1962 and were never definitively found. The FBI closed the case in 1979. The U.S. Marshals Service has technically never closed it. The paranormal history of Alcatraz predates the federal penitentiary. Native American groups considered the island cursed long before the Spanish arrived. Spanish and then U.S. military use of the island preceded the famous prison by decades, and accounts of strange sounds and presences on the island date back at least to the military period. Within the prison itself, Cell Block D, solitary confinement known as the Hole, has the strongest reported history. Cell 14D in particular was reportedly feared by inmates. One account, documented by prison staff at the time, describes an inmate placed in 14D screaming through the night that something with glowing eyes was in the cell with him. He was found strangled the next morning. The official cause of death was listed as unknown. His hands were reportedly around his own neck. Rangers who work at the now public historic site have reported lights turning on in sealed areas, doors slamming in cell blocks with no draft or air movement, and, more than once, the strong smell of smoke and metal with no identifiable source. The utility corridor beneath the cell blocks, a cramped, low tunnel used by the escaped Morris and Anglin brothers in 1962, is reportedly one of the most unsettling areas of the island for staff who have to access it for maintenance. Most of them don't go alone. Number 2. The Villisca Axe Murder House, Villisca, Iowa. In the early morning hours of June 10, 1912, someone entered a modest white house in Villisca, Iowa, and murdered everyone inside. Josiah Moore, his wife Sarah, their 4 children, and 2 young house guests, sisters Lena and Ina Stillinger, were all killed in their sleep with an axe. The youngest victim was 5 years old. No one was ever convicted of the murders. The house has been preserved, or more precisely, restored to its 1912 condition, and operates as a museum and overnight rental. Visitors can sleep in the same rooms where the murders took place. The paranormal activity reported at the Villisca house is, in the context of everything on this list, unusually physical. Guests have reported objects moving. A paranormal investigator named Robert Lorson reportedly stabbed himself on the property during an overnight investigation in 2014. He survived, and later stated he had no memory of doing it. Iowa state investigators looked into the incident. No charges were filed. Children seem particularly drawn to the property in ways that are hard to account for. Multiple families have reported their young children asking to speak to the children in the house, apparently unprompted, or describing playmates that no adult in the group could see. The murders remain unsolved. The house remains available for overnight rental. Whether those two facts together represent a tourist opportunity or a genuinely bad idea depends on how you handle unresolved things. Number 1. The Riddle House, West Palm Beach, Florida. West Palm Beach isn't where most people expect to find the top of a haunted places list, but the Riddle House has a history that earns its place. The house was built around 1905 as a funeral parlor office on the grounds of Woodlawn Cemetery in West Palm Beach. Carl Riddle, the city's utilities manager, lived in it for a time in the 1920s. In 1920, a city employee named Joseph, who had worked for Riddle, hanged himself in the attic of the house. His reasons were never made public. After Carl Riddle's death, the house fell into disrepair. Workers hired to demolish it in the 1980s reportedly refused to continue after a series of violent incidents. Tools thrown from the attic, workers pushed, equipment failing. The house was eventually donated to Yesteryear Village, a historic preservation village in West Palm Beach, where it was relocated and restored. Since the move, the reported activity has continued, and in some accounts, intensified. Multiple visitors and investigators have described being pushed, shoved, or grabbed in the attic space specifically. One of the more documented accounts involves a Dutch paranormal investigative team that visited in the early 2000s. Several members of the team were reportedly injured. One was struck hard enough to require medical attention. The team left early. The attic is the focal point of nearly every account. The spirit most consistently associated with the house is still referred to as Joseph, the man who died there in 1920. By most accounts, he is not welcoming of visitors, particularly men. It is a small, unassuming white house sitting in a Florida heritage village. and yet more people have left it in a hurry than almost any other location on this list. Some of these places have been studied, investigated, and argued over for decades. Others carry documented histories of violence or tragedy that don't need a ghost story to feel heavy. Whether you believe in what people report or not, every location on this list has had enough consistent, independent accounts over enough years that dismissing all of it is its own kind of decision. These are America's 15 most haunted places. And yes, the locals really do warn you not to visit some of them. If you made it to the end, hit that like button and subscribe. There's a lot more of this kind of thing where it came from.